Good morning and welcome to the Leawood Chamber's 2020 annual meeting. I'm Kevin Jeffries, President and CEO of the Leawood Chamber and EDC. Thank you all for joining us today. We're also used to seeing each other's smiling faces at the annual meeting, and since we can't this year, we'd love for you to let us know you're here. If you log in to today's session using a Google ID, please post your name and company name in the comments to say hi. This year's meeting marks a special year as we are celebrating 25 years since the Leawood Chamber's business people started gathering at the McDonald's at 119th and Row to lay the foundation for the Leawood Chamber of Commerce. The Leawood Chamber is fortunate to have the support of so many outstanding organizations that make events like today's possible. Our event hosts include Country Club Bank, Burns & McDonnell, Advent Health, CrossFirst Bank, Demdeco, and Menorah Medical Center. Our event patron sponsors are Evergy, Town Center Plaza and Crossing, St. Luke's Health System, Bank of Blue Valley, AMC Theaters, Discover Vision Centers, McGowan Gordon Construction, Commerce Bank, and UMB Bank. And also a big thank you to our event associate sponsors that are all displayed on your screen. Without all this support, we couldn't have brought you all the great programming this year. A special thanks also goes to Spectrum Reach, who is today's media sponsor. Spectrum Reach and the Leawood Chamber have teamed up to support local businesses this holiday season. Here's a short video encouraging everyone to check out all the businesses that make the Kansas City Metro thrive.
With the holiday season upon us, Spectrum Reach and Leawood Chamber are encouraging you to support local this year. By supporting local, you're investing in our Kansas City metro area's community and culture. Our chamber is made up of over 450 member businesses. To find a local business to support, visit rebuildmytown.com/Kansas-City. Spectrum Reach and Leawood Chamber are proud to support local business today and every day.
Our friends at Spectrum Reach live, work, and shop in our neighborhoods. They're not just partners, they care deeply about your local business. We hope you consider shopping local this holiday season and help keep small businesses moving forward. Someone who has been extremely instrumental in our success this year is Amy Teisling, CFO at Demdeco and our 2020 board chair. Thank you, Amy, so much for all of your guidance and support during 2020.
Thank you, Kevin. I am Amy Teisling, and as Kevin said, I am the CFO at Demdeco, a Leawood-based business, and have also served as the board chair of the Leawood Chamber in 2020. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Although the year ended up much different than planned when we started preparing for 2020, I am very proud of all that the Leawood Chamber has accomplished. When I spoke to you at this time last year, I shared our 3 board goals for 2020. Revising the Chamber's mission statement to reflect the value we strive to offer our members, keeping a watchful eye on our membership count, and introducing a new women's leadership series. We revised our mission statement to pursuing business prosperity through innovation and collaboration. I feel like we have innovated and adapted more than ever this year. Members, sponsors, and staff have come together to make this year as successful as possible given the circumstances. The Chamber staff quickly transitioned to working from home and found ways to offer several resources to our members related to COVID-19, providing a list of member restaurants offering carryout, featuring member banks offering PPP loans, and sharing CARES Act funding available through the county where the initial resources offered. Chamber staff then created new programming like virtual networking events and educational webinars, and resumed hosting a few in-person events in a very safe manner. The Chamber did launch its first programming focused on women. It was a 3-part series, and we had over 200 registrants as part of that series. And although we were unable to host Taste of Leawood this year, we partnered with Town Center Plaza on their 25th anniversary celebration. On the economic development front, there has been quite a bit of new project activity in Leawood, including discussions on numerous mixed-use projects for the 135th Street corridor. Offspring, a provider of cloud-based services for businesses, announced it will begin building its headquarters in Leawood in the first quarter of 2021. The Economic Development Council partnered with the city, developers, architects, and contractors to obtain feedback to help make Leawood more attractive to development while maintaining the city's high standard of quality. And lastly, 2 editions of the Look to Leawood magazine were distributed in 2020, highlighting Leawood's first-class public safety departments and female business leaders in the community. In closing, thank you to the Chamber staff for your commitment and dedication through a difficult year. In a year of unprecedented pivoting, two words used quite frequently lately, you stepped up and pivoted in almost every way. On behalf of the Chamber's members and sponsors, thank you. The Board of Directors deserves a big thank you for their commitment to the Chamber in 2020. Our needs and requests of the board looked very different, but board members were willing to help in all the ways that were required. I enjoyed partnering with you all this year and look forward to continuing our work as well as with the Chamber staff in 2021. Most importantly, thank you to our members and sponsors who make this organization what it is. Our board goal is to keep a watchful eye on membership count, turned early on to offering new and beneficial services in this difficult year where many businesses have not been able to survive. As we enter into 2021, we're hopeful that we're turning the corner on COVID and that the Leawood Chamber can continue to play a key role in the prosperity of our business community as it has for 25 years. I'd like to wish Calvin Gerard the best of luck as I pass the board chair torch to him. Calvin has a vested interest in the community as a Leawood resident. He also has a great business sense and is a strategic thinker, which I think will serve him well as the Chamber looks forward. Calvin.
Thank you, Amy, and a big thank you to all of you who are joining us virtually. Amy, on behalf of our board, I'd like to take a moment to share our gratitude and thanks for your leadership in navigating the Chamber through this challenging period, and for your actions and direction early in March and April as we worked through COVID to work closely with the board to help stabilize the business and position it for sustainable growth. As I approach my 6th year on the Leawood Chamber, I am genuinely excited to represent as chair to serve a city that I love and to work alongside Kevin, Deanna, Georgina, and Alan to ensure that together we can deliver value to our stakeholders and position the Chamber for continued success. I truly am in awe of what Kevin and the team have been able to accomplish in this year. As we look to 2021, we expect the hard work, adaptability, perseverance, and commitment shown this year by the Chamber to provide personalized service to the city of Leawood, to our sponsors and members, and to others who invest their time and effort to be on full display. We recognize this period of disruption has and continues to highlight the challenges our members face. To do our part in the recovery and to position our members for success, I will work closely with our board and the team to align the Chamber's strengths to 3 important areas. First, building sustainable long-term relationships with businesses that have deep connections within the city of Leawood. Second, continuing to explore ways to deliver outstanding value to small businesses that depend on making personal connections. And last, but certainly not least, supporting and working with the wonderful city of Leawood, which I have called home for over 8 years, to continue to foster a constructive environment where businesses can thrive. In addition, we will continue to build on the success of our Women's Series, including introducing additional programming around diversity, equity, and inclusion, our topic for today. Back to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Calvin. We're all looking forward to your leadership in 2021. This year marks some important membership anniversary milestones for quite a few of our members. 12 businesses are celebrating 25 years of membership. The sustained support from these businesses has helped the Chamber fulfill its mission to promote commerce in our region. This year also marks the anniversary of 20 years of membership for 8 of our member businesses. And importantly also, these 12 businesses have been a part of the Chamber for 10 years. On behalf of the entire membership and staff of the Chamber, we thank you for your continuing support. You know, a large part of the Chamber's success is all the time donated by our members to serve on committees. Several of our committee chairs are completing their terms at the end of this year. Those individuals include Jesse Little, Brecklin Wright, Monty Spradling, and Lisa Carl. Thanks to all of you for your involvement. Another very important group that contributes significantly to the Chamber's success by leading our policy direction and monitoring our financial activities is our board of directors. There's a lot of people who spend time here. Special recognition also goes to our board members who will be leaving the board at the end of this year. Thank you specifically to Rob Bruckman, Ryan Fisher, Sean Kincaid, Caitlin Waters, and Eric Winkler. Your service and commitment to the success of the Leawood Chamber is greatly appreciated. Another big thank you goes to our Chamber ambassadors. This social, service-oriented group can be counted on to attend ribbon cuttings, call on fellow Chamber members to gather feedback for the staff and board, help fellow members make connections, greet our members at events, even virtual events, and volunteer for many of the Chamber's other activities. Annually, in honor of the service and dedication of this great group of volunteers, and in memory of one of our most dedicated ambassadors, we present the Brian Schwark Ambassador of the Year Award. This award is voted on by their peers on the Ambassadors Committee. Nominees are chosen based on characteristics such as their willingness to help others connect and promoting the Leawood Chamber in the community, all characteristics that Brian Schwark embodied. I'm happy to announce that this year's Ambassador of the Year Award goes to Mark Barone with Edward Jones. Congrats, Mark.
All right. I want to thank the Leawood Chamber and the Ambassador Committee for this award. 2020 has been a year of ups and downs, but what has remained constant are the relationships and the support of the Leawood Chamber community. I have heard that there were several recounts and I won by one vote, which proves what we've always said here at the Leawood Chamber, that one company, one person can make all the difference in the world. So, go be that one person that makes a difference. And get ready for 2021. It's going to be a great year. Thank you and God bless.
Thanks, Mark. In 2000, the Chamber Board instituted an award to honor excellence in our community. The Leawood Hall of Fame Award is presented to individuals and organizations whose accomplishments have promoted the safety, health, prosperity, or welfare in the community. This year's award goes to the Barstow School. Among the many accomplishments of the Barstow School this year, their work to help facilitate preparation of 8 million meals for Kansans most impacted by the pandemic was truly extraordinary.
On behalf of the Barstow School, I am honored to accept the 2020 Leawood Chamber Hall of Fame Award. Leawood families have been part of our school community since our move to State Line Road in 1961. We added a physical presence in Leawood in 2018 with the purchase of the former Hy-Vee building in Leawood Plaza, providing a wonderful opportunity to become more active in the Chamber and the community. To say 2020 has been a challenging year is an enormous understatement. But with a challenge of this magnitude, we also saw an opportunity to make a lasting impact on our community, our region, and our world. We are fortunate to have the resources to support the community from the Idea Space building. As a result of our outreach to the state of Kansas, the National Guard, and the Outreach Project, packaged and distributed 8 million meals between May and October. With support from the City of Leawood and the Chamber, this effort brought welcome relief to food insecure families throughout the state in a time of great need. We are committed to delivering an exceptional educational experience in Leawood, across the state line and throughout the world. Barstow leads the way for safe, effective, and continuous in-person and online learning, with the flexibility to choose your method of delivery each day. Our pledge to the families we serve is that Barstow will promote sound scholarship and give symmetrical development to mind, body, and character. On behalf of the Barstow community, I am honored to accept this award from the Leawood Chamber for its gracious recognition of our efforts. Thank you very much.
Thanks to all of our friends at the Barstow School. It's been truly a great year for you guys, and we really appreciate all you've done. Now I'm going to turn things back over to Calvin, who will lead us in today's presentation. As a reminder, if you have questions for our panelists today, please enter them in the comments section, and we will try to address as many as time permits. Please note that you will need to be logged into your Google or YouTube account to post a question.
Kevin, thank you. And Mark, congratulations, and the Barstow School as well. Thank you for all that hard work. Before we get into the panel topic, I first wanted to take the time to recognize Caitlin Waters. It's really her passion and energy around this topic is why we're diving into it, and also we'll work really hard to make inroads in 2021 as we think through diversity, equity, inclusion, and what it means to our region. What it means to Johnson County, what it means to the Leawood Chamber. So with that, I will turn it over to Michael Gonzales. Michael, welcome, Michael. And just before we start, I'll ad-lib a little. So earlier this summer, Michael had an opportunity to come over to Evergy, well, virtually. Right at Evergy now, we are currently working through a DEI series, really working to ingrain it within our culture. And Michael and the team that he brought in were instrumental in helping start that conversation within Evergy, and that work continues today, and just in the dialogue that we had in the summertime. So Michael, being the founder of the Diversity and Inclusion Consortium in Kansas City, can you give us a brief description of what DEI means and stands and why it's important to our region?
Sure. Thank you, Calvin, and hello to everyone out there in the virtual space. Diversity and inclusion arguably has been around for 25, 30 years, if we can all believe that. But I think what we're seeing today, and probably at a more amped up rate or pace, is that we're moving from a transactional perception of what diversity and inclusion is to a more strategic reality of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. And I think that companies, organizations are starting to reach out in-house to their D&I people or outside externally to individuals that can help them understand just the pure value of DE&I, but also how it helps bottom line, and then also how it builds an inclusive culture for their workforce. So, I see people coming into this space proactively, and then also just a reaction from all the things that have happened in 2021.
Thank you, Michael.
Sure. What I would like to do now is introduce our panelists. And what I've told the panelists is this is the stuff that they do every day. And so it's going to be more of a conversation. What I have learned being out in the audience is I learn better when the panelists are comfortable, they're not really staged and over processed, so where they can really talk from their heart and their knowledge. And I think especially with diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is more impactful if people do talk from their heart versus their heads. So with that, let me introduce to you our three esteemed panelists. And the first individual panelist I'd like to introduce is Nikki Beard. She is the Director of Strategic Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives at St. Luke's Health System. Hello, Nikki.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm fine. And
well, I'm excited to be here today, Michael, and I'm just very happy to be a part of this panel.
Thank you so much. The next panelist I'd like to introduce is Silas Dulan. He is the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Evergy, and is a dear friend.
Right on. Thank you, Michael. Trying to get this nickname to stick. So thank you, Godfather, for this time for us to collaborate and congregate together. So really excited, to Nikki's point, to have a conversation with us virtually about diversity, equity, inclusion, and how it is really a cultural dynamic that businesses should take very seriously as we move forward. So looking forward to the dialogue.
Yeah, appreciate that, Silas. And last, I'd like to introduce John Moncke. He is the Executive Vice President of Stadium Revenue at Sporting KC and a member of the Blue Valley Schools DE&I Committee. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be a part of the conversation. Wish we were at an event all together, but thankfully we have the technology that we can share some time together this way. And really hope that while we have some experts on the panel, that I can just share, if you're just think, hey, I'm a regular business person, I'm a leader in my org, and I want to do something to make a difference, I'm going to try to speak from that point of view.
Well, John, and I think you'll be bringing in an interesting perspective, because while Silas and Nikki work in the D&I space, we always like to balance that with a business perspective. So I think it'll resonate very well with the audience. So with that, panelists, let me get started. I never want to take for granted that everybody understands what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. So if each one of you, and I'll ask you by name, if each one of you would spend about 30, 45 seconds talking about how you define diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that would be a good foundation for us to engage in the panel discussion. So Nikki, would you start?
Sure. When I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I really think about, diversity is truly talking about our differences. I mean, how different are we? And for years we did that and we focused on that. But I really think inclusion is talking about, yes, we're different, but is everybody who's different represented in the space? Is everybody here that has a different perspective? And then you think about equity, and that really is a term I think is super important. And that's the thread that runs through it all. And every question you ask me today, I probably will hit upon equity. But I would even go a bit further and talk about ultimately where we want to be is belonging, right? When people walk through our doors of our organizations, we want everyone to feel a sense of belonging there, regardless of what organization we're in. We want people to feel like they belong. So I think diversity, inclusion, equity, those are all the pillars that we must have. But I think that roof that's on that house is a belonging that we want everyone to feel.
Very well. Very nice. Very nicely said, Nikki. John, how would you define diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2020, going on 2021?
What she said. No. For me, I was saying this earlier to the group. You can see I'm brown, and I've been brown my whole life, but only working on this space the last 7 or 8 months. And I think easy way for me to describe it is, I think we're just trying to expand the opportunities of the Old Boys Club to everyone, so that everyone has the opportunities to thrive and succeed. And we'll get into it a little bit later. That's not bad for people that were a part of the Old Boys Club. This is just going to help lift all of our businesses. So I'm really excited to talk more about why this is important. But for me, just give you my simple definition. We're expanding the opportunities of the Old Boys Club to everyone.
John, and you bring up a good point, because I think a lot of times when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, we do go to gender or race and now orientation, but it is so much more involved than that. And so with that, Silas, let me ask you how you would define diversity, equity, and inclusion today.
Yeah, Michael, I appreciate that bare bones kind of brass tactic question, because as we think about DE&I across all landscapes, regardless of industry or regardless of sector, it's really important to have a real definition as to what that means. So in my mind, I'll give two kind of anecdotal analogies, if you will. So number one, I would say think of diversity, equity, and inclusion as a dance, right? So the diversity is essentially being invited to the dance. The inclusion is actually being asked to dance, and then the equity component is where you feel comfortable enough to go to the DJ's booth and ask them to play your favorite song. Now, the DJ is not going to continue to play that artist that you love so much. You're not going to put it on next. They'll put it on when it's appropriate. So think of equity in that capacity. But from a business standpoint, to think about DE&I, think about diversity is ultimately just the numbers. Equity is really getting the numbers right. And inclusion, you could think about it in terms of making the numbers count. And so as we move forward from a business imperative to think about when you do diversity, equity, and inclusion correctly, when you do it right, the byproduct of that is culture. And so a lot of us as practitioners are working hard at driving this cultural component. And Michael, to your point, culture, people of color and people of culture, they bring all these dynamics to your place of business, which I think we'll speak to a little bit later on, but it's kind of wanted to give some brass tactic vocabulary words, if you will, around the topic.
Very good. Thank you, Silas. And, I think with you giving the analogy of the story, that seems to resonate so much with people that are just getting familiar with DE&I. So I always love stories and analogies. But let's get started. When we were talking and preparing for this, we have tons of questions, and we had to narrow it down to the ones that we thought would be beneficial for the audience today, right? But I'm still going to take the privilege of calling audibles and pivots if I think we're on really something good. But one of the things in looking at a chamber and the chamber member, what's important to them would be the business aspect of it, right? So, John, why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important for a company today from a business perspective?
Yeah, I love this. To me, this is the most important question. And, all of us participating on this call, we're all business leaders. And we know that business is a tough business. And especially we know that this year. And business is all about results. So how do we achieve results? I think we all know it's through people. So what we do is all about winning the people game. And I think we all understand we have a high calling to provide meaningful work for all the associates in our sphere of influence so that they can create wealth for their families. And my recommendation for how to help and why this is so important is I think we've got to make sure that we prioritize having not only a diverse workforce, but making sure that everyone's supported. And this is the right thing to do after years of systems that have designed to hold back women and people of color. But it's also good for business. I think there's a ton of data around the most successful businesses like Apple and Amazon being very committed to diverse workforces because they've got people solving complex problems that are coming from all kinds of backgrounds, and that's the best way to thrive right now.
John, let me probe a little further. So with sporting, what would you say is the ROI advantage of reaching out and helping the communities of color and culture appreciate the sporting product? How would that help the revenue with sporting?
So I'll say this, we don't really look at it like that. I mean, you could say if you're a sports team, just like any of us, we've got businesses that we want to appeal to as broad of a market as possible. So it's good to focus not just on one group, but on everyone. But we're not really looking at it from an external factor. In some respects, I'm a little uncomfortable even talking about this because we've only been doing this work, like I said, for about 7 months, even though sporting's been around for 10 years. So that's probably a little embarrassing to admit, but I think we're all in the same business community. So some others can probably relate to that. For us, we're looking at it more from how do we continue to fuel innovation in the future? And we know what got us to where we are now. And we know that it's going to require a diverse group of talented individuals that are going to help us achieve our business objectives over the next 5 and 10 years.
Great. Thank you, John. Nikki, let's talk about workplace. And for the audience, we got a few different categories that we want to talk or have a conversation about. And one is workplace. So Nikki, from a business perspective, what is one or two of the biggest misperceptions regarding DE&I today in the business world?
I would say the biggest one is that it's hard to implement, right? People feel like it's one of those things that is hard to implement. Where do I start? Is there a starting point? I haven't been doing it a long time, but I feel like you have to start somewhere, right? I will say my organization has done a remarkable job in this, and we've been doing it for years. I mean, I believe it was 1996, if I'm not mistaken, when we started these initiatives in the diversity and inclusion space. But I do think you have to start. You just have to start. And many times I think that people think it's just too hard. It's going to be too much. How are we going to make this happen? 9 times out of 10, you have people in your organization that are willing to give you some of that knowledge. Most of it, to your point, Michael, what you said earlier, is just storytelling, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so some of it is, one of the things we do is we have a diversity and inclusion and equity council that's made up of many people in our organization, employees, and we come together and we put together activities and engagement activities for employees and just things like that to make sure that individuals are able to have those conversations. But a lot of times it's just we don't know what we don't know. And I think for many organizations, feeling like you're not where you need to be, you have to start somewhere. You just have to start.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. Silas, let me probe deeper on that question. So externally, being the D&I person for Evergy, what are some of the biggest misperceptions from organizations looking at Evergy? And as the D&I person, how do you address those?
Yes, a great question. So a lot of it has to do with what we spoke about a little while ago is making the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because when you think about this from a business standpoint, one of the first things we learn in business school as we go through the ranks is leave your personal life at home, right? Leave those feelings at home. And so when we talk about culture, how do you measure culture? Because essentially all things culture related is based on a feeling. And so how do you create a culture around, and how do you put metrics around feelings? So from a business standpoint, one thing that we're looking at right now as an organization from a industry standpoint is ESG. ESG stands for environmental, societal governance. And so essentially this is the scorecard that utilities have when it comes to shareholder value. So with the E representing environmental, we are a utility. We are the energy company for Greater Kansas City, Topeka, and Wichita. And so as we look at that, we want to make sure that we're environmentally sound, to make sure that I think we're going to be 85% carbon free by the year 2050. The G, I'll skip over the S and get to that here in a second. The G stands for governance. What is the structure around? What are the parameters? What are the policies around governance within our organization? And the S, due to a lot of civil distress is happening in the wake of George Floyd and the racial reckoning that we're having in the United States, a lot of shareholders are taking more seriously now than they ever have around the S, which is social justice and societal. And so as we start to develop our game plan, as we start to develop our strategy, there is a lot more monetary value tied to the business case of ensuring that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of the culture going forward. So from a misconception standpoint, it's a feel-good story. It's a feel-good thing. We should do it. It's a philanthropic thing. There's so much more to it than just that. And then, Tom, to your point too, Michael, when people think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's usually met with it being a pigment problem or a gender issue. Then we get to go into the conversation of intersectionality, which I think we may get into later on, but there's a lot of parallels in that. And to John's point, perspective brings value, perspective brings innovation, perspective brings culture and pride to an organization.
Great. Thank you, Silas. So here's my first audible. because I was going to ask a leadership question, but I'm going to go, since you mentioned Silas, community. John, besides philanthropic dollars, what else can a company do to support our diverse communities? Because I think a lot of times we sit down as a corporation and we know that it's our obligation and probably our want and desire to be able to support different parts of the community, right? But we do that usually with dollars. What else can an organization do to support those communities of color and culture?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a quick story. So my aunt, Dr. Elizabeth Ann Sanders, was the principal at Blue Valley North High School back in the 90s. And so I stand on her generation's shoulders. If you go back before her parents couldn't get more than a elementary school education because where they lived in Paris, Arkansas, and at that time they didn't have a school for Black kids past the elementary school. So where my focus is, and like I said, we're very early in this on the sporting side, but we're really focused on jobs. And so what I mean, so we're really looking at making sure that we expand the candidates that we're looking at for positions. We're looking at very closely how we recruit, and this isn't just about checking the box so that we're more diverse. We've got a lot of plans around how we then support the more diverse candidates once we hire them. So where we are in this industry, we've got not just a racial diversity issue that we want to do better on. We've also got gender diversity. And so we're really seeking to support the associates of underrepresented groups that we've got right now. And we're looking to do that even more so with the group that we're about to bring in. And the final thing I want to say around that is a lot of us can probably relate to, it's been a tough year for business, and many companies have had to downsize and furlough, and that presents a great opportunity if you want to take this issue seriously, at least to start the first step to commit to recruit a more diverse workplace. That's not the end game, but I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I would argue that the more diverse that you bring in as a workforce, the more diverse thought that comes with that. And so a better decision or outcome will surely follow. Let's stick with community, Nikki. Is there an opportunity to engage with young people to share information and possibly support them regarding occupations that are critical to businesses? Following up on John's question.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing there, because I do think that that's where it starts, right? With recruitment, you have to go into the communities. And a lot of times if you recruit in the same places, not that it's a bad thing, that's the same type of results you're going to get. Those are the same individuals that will come into your organization. So I think you still recruit where you recruit, and you get the candidates, but you also expand that. You stretch yourself a little bit. And so I think about different places. Also thinking about when to start recruiting, because back to equity, some schools may not have as many resources available to them for students to understand the different things that come into different organizations and different careers they can go, what paths they can go down. So I think as communities, as businesses, as organizations, what we have to do is partner with some of these schools, not in just high school, but also middle school, so that they know when they get to high school what type of classes they need to take, and then when they get to college what they should be majoring in. And so I think some of the things that businesses and organizations can do to get youth, because that's our future, our youth, we have to go into those communities, various communities. I'm not saying you don't go into this community, but you go into various communities and you give them access to different information.
Yeah, Nikki, that was a really good point. I work with one university, and to try and get people of color and women into the STEM programs, they have moved from supporting universities to high schools, and now we're putting in support programs for junior high, just to be able to make that connection with that family and that child in order to have them as a potential employee sometime down the road. So very good point. Silas, let's move over to leadership. And this is one of the things that you and I have talked a lot about. Sometimes, real or perceived, if you move up through an organization, the perception that you need to know everything about everything is great. And either that's self-imposed or it's imposed by the business or the work community that you're in. what do you suggest to business leaders to free up that harness, that inhibitor, to be open to learn and understand about what diversity and inclusion is? Because you and I are very comfortable in saying that we don't know everything about D&I, and we do diversity, equity, and inclusion every day.
Right on. So I'll answer that one. I want to add a supplement to what Brother John and Sister Nikki said too about the recruiting aspect. So in my mind, the other side of recruiting is infrastructure. And so as you bring in these individuals into your organization that are Black, that are brown, that are women, that are gay, that are veteran, that have disabilities, you have to have an infrastructure in place to support them as well. So to give you a real quick story, I had a conversation with one of our supervisors, and he kind of met me at the door and said, Silas, I understand all this DE&I stuff that you're working on. Sounds great, but I don't care if a person is Black, white, green, blue, or purple. And I said, I understand what you're saying, but for that purple person, this means everything to them. Are they going to see other purple people once they show up at our organization? Are they going to see purple people in leadership at our organization? Is there going to be a congregation of other purple people that they can sit down and have conversations with? So as we think about our recruiting strategy, the other side of the strategy is the infrastructure. And so for us, we're thinking about DE&I in 3 areas. One is talent management, so that infrastructure, talent attraction, the intentionality about bringing talent in, and stewardship in 2 parts. One is stewardship of being good stewards of our money from a supplier diversity standpoint, and the other side of stewardship is being linked to the community. So just want to throw that in kind of as a supplement. But as far as leadership goes, Michael, it all has to start from the top as a best practice. Your executives have to be bought in for the value and the importance of DE&I. One other anecdotal thing I'll add on to leadership too, and I know we got to go to the next question, is thinking about leadership in terms of, to your point, Michael, we're all students in this genre, if you will, of DE&I. And so I had a conversation with an individual the other day, and he asked me point blank, how do you keep from getting frustrated in the work that you're doing? Because we all come at this at varying levels. And so I gave him the analogy of that this is similar to mathematics. And so for all of us, we're at different levels of math, right? Some of us are at trigonometry, some of us are at calculus, some of us are at arithmetic, some of us are at geometry. So the people that I have difficulty working with are those folks that don't feel that math is important. Because if you come to me and say, hey, I want to learn about this, if you're at an arithmetic level, that is completely fine. At least you understand the value of math. And so it's in the same context from DE&I, there are varying levels of this. And for us as practitioners, understand that. But I'm learning every day, right? Mm-hmm. Michael's learning every day. Nikki's learning every day. Brother John's learning every day. There are different levels of the skill set, but you have to understand the value of math, i.e. the value of DE&I, what it brings to your organization.
Can I hop in there too? And Silas mentioned just leadership buy-in. And I think we've got a bunch of leaders on this call. Obviously, you're a group of folks that think it's important to be a part of the community and to network with other leaders in the community. And I just want to speak to that for a second. So if you look at the individuals on this call, you can see us, we're brown. And you may say, well, I'm not. Well, actually, we need you to do the heavy lifting, because we're not in this situation where we're talking about the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, because anything that we did, the folks on this call. So hear me when I say this. I don't mean that with any kind of disrespect. We need you to do the heavy lifting. And so if you wonder, well, what can I do? I think we're going to get into that during this call as well.
And I have one thing I want to add, Michael. I know, but our conversation is just growing here, right? So let it go organically. And even to that point, I love what John just said, but even thinking from it, even expanding it, because a lot of times I think what people think about is, race, right? And that's that's something we have to talk about. But also even social economic issues, even individuals in religious spaces, even gender, generation. We got 5 generations in the workplace right now, right? And so even all these things that people may be doing things a little differently. And really quickly, I think about when they sent the kids home for virtual learning back in March because of COVID. I remember seeing something in the space of social economics, and they sent a lot of the kids home in some schools with laptops to do their work. but those kids got home with their laptops but didn't have Wi-Fi in some situations, right? And so just understanding that these are issues that are much bigger than just one thing. It goes across. Once again, that thread runs through a lot of different things.
Nikki, that is so powerful and on point, because I think with the pandemic, the thing in the DE&I space that has really kind of moved to the top is this disparity between the socioeconomic levels and the things that we didn't take for granted, because someone from a neighborhood would come into work and rely on the systems, and we just took for granted that they went back to work from home, that they would have those support mechanisms, and they weren't there. And then the other thing you bring up, which is really powerful too, is the generational piece. I'm a young professional. You recruit me really hard. I walk on water. At least that's what you told me. I come into the workplace and my management's mature, and they say that I'll have a voice in 3 to 5 years. Your Gen Z employee won't stay if that's the mindset that you have. So let's talk about this inside the workplace. So you all, and anybody take this question. So you all are recruiting really hard to bring in a diverse workforce. What can you do inside of your organization's walls to make that individual feel that they can be their whole selves, and they can be genuine and authentic to who they are? Well, anybody?
Well, I will tell you, one of the things we do, once again, I will toot the horn of my organization because I love it. I really do. And I think we do an amazing job in this space. But every employee who goes through new employee orientation goes through diversity training, period. We're investing in this because we want you to know, coming through the door, this is important. And when we talk about diversity in diversity training, we talk about, back to Silas, people that everybody that walks through the door will not look like you, will not act like you, will not speak like you, right? And so you still have to meet that individual where they are. And how do we do that? And giving them the tools, understanding if it's a language barrier, we have this department, if it's this, if it's that, giving people tools to put in their toolbox so when they come to work, they have those resources available.
Silas, John?
I would say a big component of that is to be able to, kind of to Nikki's point, is to engage the infrastructure. So these are long-lasting things that are going to be a part of the company's culture going forward. One of the areas for my office that we realized relatively quickly is our communications plan. And so we've had the opportunity to develop our intranet page, is how we're communicating to the entire organization as to what we're working on from a DE&I standpoint, because we're a big company, right? And we have a tendency to fall off into silos. Nothing unique to Evergy. It happens at all big companies. But one thing I would say, kind of to toot our horns, since we're horn tooting now, Nikki, because I love my place too, right? So one of the things we have at our organization, we have, from a cultural standpoint, we have a very large safety culture at our organization. And so one of our standing rules that we implemented after the inception of diversity, equity, inclusion, at the inception of our merger, is our safety moments. So one of the standing rules that we have at Evergy is if there's 3 or more people in a room, whether in person or virtually, they have a safety topic. Well, as of October, we just rolled out inclusion moments, not to be in competition or to replace safety moments. It's ultimately to be the left and right arm of a cultural dynamic. So the idea behind that is to create a muscle memory for the organization. Because I know for me, for example, when we have our safety moments, it started to matriculate into my everyday life. As I'm putting up Christmas lights the other day, I had a guy on my roof, stuff started to fall off. I need my safety glasses. I need my PPE. That wasn't a thought I had 6 years ago. And so as we think about inclusion moments, these things are always around us. And so I just got off the phone with our I'm not going to say who it was, a person in my organization that had a really intense conversation with his wife around, he's a white male in our organization. He sent a video to some folks on the basketball team, and it was a video of Snoop Dogg. And his wife got on him for sending that video out to the basketball team because the coach is black and the wife is white. And she's like, "How could you do that?" And he says, "Well, these are the things we're talking about at work, honey. So how come this is an issue for me to send this video out, so let's have some dialogue. And so ultimately, this is something that we're doing now at our organization, where it is to get people comfortable with talking about inclusion. The idea behind the inclusion moments is not to create any type of divisive topics or anything like that, but there's a million and one things you could talk about from an inclusion standpoint, to at least to do three things: to hopefully to bring more awareness to topics. We may learn we have more in common with each other than we had realized. And then ultimately, too, to create a culture of belonging. It's kind of to Nikki's point before, to where you have pride in your company, you feel safe, you feel like you belong to this culture.
Yeah, thank you, Silas. Anything, John, you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing I think I would add is, when we think about diversity, we think we can see diversity, and we can't see all kinds of diversity. And Nikki hit on this a little bit already, and so did Silas. But, there are people that you may look at that you think don't check the diversity box, but you don't know what their family looks like, or, you don't know who they choose to love. And this diversity issue is so much broader and impacts so many more people than probably you think when you first are scratching the surface on it.
Great. Hey, thank you all. And we want to leave time for Q&A. So if you guys could give us a golden nugget of a takeaway, what would you want our audience to take away from this session? And then we'll go into about a 10-minute Q&A. Nikki, what would you want the audience to walk away with today?
I would want each person to walk away with the fact that equality and equity are different. And both are important, but to understand the difference. Equality is giving everybody the same. Equity is giving everybody what they need. And I really think if we could remember that, and when you're sitting down with people and having conversations, really getting to know the person and finding out what that person's needs are.
Beautiful, Nikki. Thank you. Silas?
Yeah, I will say this one takeaway is as you're building your DE&I plan for your organization, I would honestly start with data, starting with demographics, to understand what the composition of your organization looks like, understanding what does your community look like, and then being able to goal set, to hopefully keep yourselves out of the perils of tokenism and quotas, but to be able to understand what opportunities do I have at this organization to bring in more women, more people of color, more veterans, more people that happen to be of the LGBT plus community. So really a nugget I would say is to look at your demographics and take a hard look. And it's really could be an indicator of the culture and climate that you have at your organization.
Great point, Silas. John?
I just think back to May, and I think a lot of people can remember watching the George Floyd video and just trying to process it. I remember Jake Reed, our CEO, my boss, worked with him closely. He's sitting in the office over next door. We came together and we were just scratching our heads. What can we do? And, everyone we're talking to right now is a leader in your organization. And Mark, before we got into the panel discussion, Mark, who was the ambassador of the year, said, one person can make all the difference in the world. And we've got all of these leaders on this call that can go out and do something. And I think Silas mentioned what we started with was, let's just see objectively where we're at. So let's commit to looking at our internal diversity numbers. And we chose to focus on both race and gender to start. And then from there, we got a group of passionate individuals in the company at all levels involved, and we did a few other things. But I would just say, just do something.
John, simple but powerful. And I think what I would do is just tell the audience that in order for you to embrace and not get overwhelmed, is it's a journey. And once you accept that it's a journey and it's not a check the box task, things will come easier for you. And it's okay to be get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll turn it. So thank you very much, panelists. We're going to take some Q&As, hopefully. And I'm going to turn it over to Kevin that's going to help manage that piece.
Well, thanks to all of you for your great comments. Talk about a journey, Michael. 20 plus years ago, my sister, who happens to be with St. Luke's Health System, started on their DE&I council, or what I think that's what it's called,
Yeah.
Nikki.
Yeah.
And she's actually who got me pointed in that direction. So I am really a slow learner. Here we are 20 some years later having a good conversation about it. But I really appreciated all the work she's done over the years on supplier diversity. And speaking of supplier diversity, I think St. Luke's has done a great job of trying to do that. So might I throw out to the group, how's a good way to really get in touch with who the diverse suppliers are out there, whether they be, part of the LGBT community or ethnically diverse or different things like that? How can you plug into those supplier networks that are out there that are diverse?
Silas?
Yeah, yeah. You saw me posturing, right? So, one thing that we have, I would say for Evergy, our supplier diversity department is our most mature and tenured effort when it comes to DE&I. I believe we started back in 1991. We have goals set around that. But one program I really wanted to brag on just for 2 seconds is our Light Source program. This is where we were helping to identify minority-owned businesses in our community and really to give them some training on what does scale look like? How do we provide some mentorship? Because as you know, the margin of error is relatively slim for our women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and the like. And so we have this program set up that has received lots of recognition and accolades. Another element I would say too is just getting serious about your commitment to minority-owned businesses and local-owned businesses too. So as you move forward as an organization, there's a lot of dollars, and that's another way of getting involved in your community. Another thing that we have in our organization too is kind of a listserv of all the minority-owned businesses that are certified. So as we work with our supply chain group and our folks at the plants that are ordering supplies and heavy machinery, we always make sure that there's an additive to that. And we do have some commitment goals to supplier diversity here at Evergy.
Well, excellent. Nikki, you also talked about earlier about sending the kids home with laptops and they didn't have Wi-Fi at home. And I know that one of the big goals for the chamber this next year is to work with the state on getting internet access more accessible to citizens throughout the state of Kansas. And I think that's going to be a really important goal for all of us to look at, is making sure it's, equal access for everybody, that there's an opportunity there. Another item, I guess, that we talked about in some of our early conversations was like making sure you know how to market to diverse communities, because there's a lot of products and services out there that these diverse communities will consume. And sometimes I think, Michael, you spoke about at Hallmark, how you kind of helped when you back in those days, how you helped that firm understand how to market to the diverse communities.
Yeah, I think for a while we would create product for the majority and the communities of color and culture would come. And I think what we realized that there was a lot of competition and there was just a lot of, we're not going to necessarily settle for that. And so what we did is we embarked on engaging our employee resource groups to help us understand the nuances and the interests and peculiarities of the communities. And so with that, we started to design product and services that would resonate. I mean, and if you really think about that, an African-American shopper shops on the average of 176 times a year, and they traditionally will not settle for a facsimile. And so if you don't have a product that they want and that they're looking for, they will go across town to get it or go on the internet to get it, and a lot of times that's with a competitor. And when you really realize that that's almost $1 billion market, that's something that you really don't want to turn away from. And then lastly, what I'd want to do is you look at understanding communities, and the LGBTQ plus community, the African-American community, Hispanic community are over-indexed in brand loyalty. And so if you can convert us to be a customer of yours, whether it's a service or a product, we're going to stick with you. You really have to mess up in order to lose us. And then when you think about the Hispanic market, which is 1.5 trillion, 1.7 trillion, that's leaving some tremendous dollars on the table.
Absolutely. And I would add to that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Nikki. Sorry.
One of the things I would add to Michael's point there is, I think also one of the things when I first came into this role, I've been with St. Luke's 20 years, but when I came into this role about 5 years ago, one of the things we decided to do was go for as a system, at each of our hospitals, the HEI designation, which is given by the Human Rights Campaign, the Healthcare Equity Index designation. And I will tell you that application is huge, right? But it is so worth filling out because it lets you realize where there may be gaps in certain things. That may be, it talks to you about who are your, what resources do you have available to this community? What don't you have available? I mean, just all these things that they give you information. And so what I think about is, how do I make this for many of our different diverse groups, right? The same type of application for our communities of color, for individuals of generational differences, just all the different types of diverse groups that we may come in contact with.
Yeah, very, very good point.
Well, I think we're getting close to the conclusion of our program for today, and I want to thank all of you. There's so many more questions to answer, and I think one of the great things is the Chamber is committed this year and going forward. Amy talked about, we started our women's series this last year, even during COVID, and it was tremendously successful. This year, we want to kind of take that a little further and move into the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion process. So stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of programming, more in-depth and detailed. I thank each and every one of you for helping us today. And we're going to help our members be the best they can be. And don't be surprised if we don't reach out to you guys sometimes for a little guidance or expertise on some things, because I think that we've got a lot of members out there that want to know how to do this in their organization. And I appreciate the time all of you have taken to be with us today. Thank you all for participating in the Leawood Chamber's 2020 annual meeting today, and for your ongoing support of the Chamber's mission of pursuing business prosperity through innovation and collaboration. We hope each and every one of you have a safe and prosperous holiday season.